Evelyn, a hard-working cafe owner with a heart full of dreams she rarely had time to pursue, felt the city's pulse quicken around her. The gala was a blur of polished marble golden chandeliers and people who spoke in hushed important tones. She clutched a borrowed purse, a shield against a world she didn't belong in. Her friend insisted she come if only to drop off the wedding gift, but Evelyn had hoped to slip in and out unnoticed. That plan crumbled the moment she saw him, Jasper, her ex of 5 years, stood by the bar, a smug, slow smile on his face. Beside him was Bianca, his new fiancée, a woman who embodied everything Evelyn wasn't. Flawless, polished, and draped in a designer dress that probably cost more than Evelyn's entire cafe's monthly rent. Their eyes met, and Jasper's smile widened. It was a victory lap, a public declaration of how well he'd done since leaving her. The air caught in Evelyn's lungs, and a familiar panic swelled in her chest. She couldn't walk past them alone, not like this. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and humiliation. She turned, scanning the room, a desperate look in her eyes. Her gaze fell on a man standing near a large potted palm tree. He was tall, well-dressed, but held himself with a quiet dignity that set him apart from the boisterous crowd. He was staring at his phone, completely absorbed in his own world, an island of calm in a sea of superficiality. He looked just as out of place as she felt. Without a second thought, Evelyn moved. It wasn't a choice, it was an instinct, a primal need to be saved from a public reckoning. She dropped her purse at her feet and threw her arms around him, her face buried in his chest. The man froze, his body stiff with surprise. She could feel the subtle warmth of his suit, the faint scent of sandalwood and old books, a comforting anchor. In her storm of anxiety, he slowly and hesitantly wrapped his arms around her, his voice a low, amused murmur in her ear. "Should I be worried?" he asked. "Please," she whispered, her voice muffled against his shirt. "Just go with it." She felt Jasper and Bianca pass behind them. Evelyn risked a peek over the man's shoulder. Jasper's face fell a little, his smug grin replaced by a look of confusion and then a hint of jealousy. It was enough. The tension eased from Evelyn's shoulders and she let out a shaky breath. The man held her a little tighter, as if sensing her relief. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I will be," she murmured, pulling away, her cheeks flushed. "Thank you for saving my life." She finally looked at him properly. He was in his mid-30s, with a sharp jawline and dark tousled hair. But it was his eyes, warm hazel eyes, that held her gaze. They were kind and curious. His suit was perfectly tailored, his watch a subtle but undeniable sign of wealth. Evelyn's embarrassment returned in a rush. "I'm so sorry," she said, quickly taking a step back. "That was weird. My ex was just right there, and I panicked." He smiled, a genuine warm smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Happens to the best of us," he said. "You've been hugged by a total stranger before?" she asked a little too loudly. "Actually, no," he chuckled. "That's a first." And just like that, the awkwardness dissipated, replaced by a shared moment of humor. It felt real. "I'm Evelyn," she offered, brushing a stray curl from her face. "Nathan," he replied. "Nice to be your temporary boyfriend." She rolled her eyes, but a smile played on her lips. "Let me buy you a drink to say thank you." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." And that's how it began, two strangers finding solace in an unexpected hug on a night they both wanted to escape. Nathan Archer, a billionaire who hated events like this, was just as surprised as she was. He had RSVP'd no 3 times, but the groom's father was a business partner. He was there to be civil, not to be embraced by a beautiful woman who looked at him like he was a human shield. She didn't know who he was, and for him that was the most refreshing thing that had happened in years. The hotel's rooftop lounge was a different world. It was still a place of polished surfaces and expensive drinks, but the open air and the distant city lights created an illusion of space and freedom. Evelyn and Nathan found a quiet corner with 2 drinks between them. Evelyn finally took off, her pinching heels sighing in relief. The tension that had held her captive all evening began to melt away, replaced by the strange warmth of Nathan's presence. He wasn't like the other men here. He didn't try to impress her or talk about his business ventures. He simply listened, his gaze steady and his posture relaxed. "You're a lifesaver, you know that," she said, her voice softer than it had been all night. "Jasper, my ex. He was a lot." Nathan just nodded, not pushing for details. "Too serious, too long." "Too wrong?" He asked, the questions hanging in the air like a silent invitation. Evelyn's smile dimmed a little. "All of the above, I guess. He was my whole world for so long. When we broke up, it felt like a part of me just disappeared. I haven't dated anyone since." She looked out over the city skyline, a sea of glittering lights stretching to the horizon. It was a view she had only ever seen in movies. Nathan watched her, not like a man sizing up a date, but like someone seeing something rare and precious. "Tonight wasn't supposed to be this," she added, gesturing between them with a hand. "I was just supposed to drop off a gift and leave." He leaned back in his chair, swirling the ice in his glass. "Me neither." "You haven't dated anyone since your ex either," she teased. "No, I mean I haven't dated anyone, period." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, disbelief coloring her tone. "A guy like you, that's hard to believe." He shrugged, a subtle movement that spoke of years of practice. "Hard to tell what people want when you've got distractions." "Distractions?" she asked. He glanced at the watch on his wrist. "This cost more than most people's cars." "That kind of thing." Evelyn's smile faded as understanding dawned on her. "You're rich." It wasn't a question, just a simple statement of fact. Nathan didn't flinch. "Yeah." Evelyn didn't react right away, just nodded slowly, setting her drink down. The weight of the moment hung between them. "You don't act like the rich guys I've met." A genuine smile returned to his face, a rare flicker of unguarded emotion. "That's because I hate most of them." Her laugh returned, softer now, more genuine. "What about you? You didn't strike me as the hug a billionaire type." "Please," she said, covering her face with her hands. "Don't say that word. I'll never live it down." He looked at her with a gentle intensity. "Really, you didn't know who I was, did you? No clue." "Does it matter now?" She met his eyes. In that moment, it didn't, but the seed of a future complication had been planted. They continued talking for hours, moving from the rooftop to a quiet corner of the bar. They spoke about everything and nothing. Evelyn shared her dream of owning a little bookshop cafe, a place where people could lose themselves in stories and a warm cup of coffee. She confessed she'd always wanted to be a writer, but life always seemed to get in the way. Nathan listened, captivated by her passion. He revealed his desire to be anonymous just once, to be a guy in a hoodie who could walk through the world unseen, not a CEO, an heir, a titan of industry. For a few hours they were just Evelyn and Nathan. No past, no money, no assumptions. Just 2 people finding a genuine connection in a fake world. When they stepped outside, the sun was high and the city buzzed with a renewed energy. Nathan turned to her. "I don't usually do this. Pick up girls who attack you in hotel lobbies," she teased. "No," he laughed. "Ask them to spend more time with me." Evelyn studied his face, her heart doing a nervous little flutter. "Why me?" He hesitated, then his hazel eyes met hers with a sincerity that took her breath away. "Because with you I don't feel like I have to be anything other than just me." She didn't respond with a joke this time. Instead, she simply nodded, a small smile of genuine happiness on her face. "Okay." They walked down the street for a while, just talking about everything and nothing, like people who were trying to remember what it felt like to be noticed for who they truly were. They found a park bench and sat there for a long time, laughing about childhood crushes and embarrassing high school moments. At one point he reached over and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. She didn't move, didn't pull away. The touch was simple and sweet. But then his phone rang and the name on the caller ID a tiny crack in their perfect bubble. He ignored it, but Evelyn caught the fleeting flicker of tension in his eyes. That evening, sitting on her couch, Evelyn's mind was racing. Out of a mixture of curiosity and anxiety, she typed his name into a search engine. Nathan Archer. There he was, CEO of Archer International. Net worth estimated in the billions. Philanthropist, tech mogul. Interviews in Forbes, Fortune, and GQ. She stared at the articles for a long time, then closed her laptop. The man she met at the party, who sat on a park bench and laughed at her dumb jokes, didn't feel like a billionaire. He felt real. But now there was a weight to his name, a pressure. Was she ready for that, or was she falling into something that would never feel equal? The next morning she got a text message from an unknown number. "You left your courage on the rooftop. I figured I should return it." Her heart raced. "Where? Should I come pick it up?" she texted back. He replied with an address. It was a bookstore. Her favorite bookstore. He was already there, sitting on the floor cross-legged between shelves, flipping through a worn poetry book when she arrived. He looked up and smiled, a genuine smile that made all her anxieties melt away. "You're really here," he said. "So are you," she replied, sitting beside him. "I half expected you to helicopter in and float down on a stack of $100 bills." He laughed, a deep, rich sound. "Not really my style." For 2 hours they were just Evelyn and Nathan. No past. No money, no exes, no assumptions. Just now. He brought up her dream of opening a bookshop and her passion for writing. He offered to help her, saying that she was the only person who had ever made him feel like more than his bank account. He saw the doubt in her eyes. "I'm not asking for anything, Evelyn. I just want to see you happy. I want to see your story written." She looked at him, and she knew he was telling the truth. Days turned into weeks, and their routines blended into a quiet rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Bookstore mornings became their sanctuary, a world away from the clamor of Nathan's life and the daily grind of Evelyn's. They would sit on the floor surrounded by stories and share pastries and coffee from her cafe. She'd talk about her dream of writing, and he'd listen with an intensity that made her feel seen. He brought her books from a list she'd scribbled down, a tiny folded piece of paper with her handwriting. "I started all of them," he said one afternoon, handing her a bag filled with novels. "But I want to finish them with you." No man had ever done anything like that for her. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. It wasn't about money or grand statements. It was about paying attention, about caring for the small, quiet things that made her who she was. One evening they found themselves on the rooftop of Evelyn's apartment building. It was a humble space, nothing like the luxurious lounge where they met, but for Evelyn, it was her sanctuary. She wore sweatpants and a hoodie, her hair in a messy bun. Nathan had a blazer draped over the railing, his sleeves rolled up, his smile quieter than usual. The city lights twinkled below, a stark contrast to the comfortable intimacy of their moment. "How does someone like you end up alone?" she asked softly. He looked up at the sky, his gaze distant. "Because I've been followed my whole life, but rarely chosen." The answer was a heavy truth that settled in the air between them. Their bond deepened with every passing day. They exchanged midnight phone calls, and handwritten notes slipped into coffee cups. But even as something beautiful bloomed between them, Evelyn couldn't silence the small voice in her head. "He's too much. You're not enough. This won't last." She didn't tell him about her student debt or the 2 jobs she worked before the cafe. She kept silent about the novel she had started 5 years ago and abandoned because life had gotten too loud, too overwhelming. She didn't want him to see her weaknesses, and Nathan didn't tell her what was waiting outside their quiet bubble. One evening after a late-night poetry reading, as they were walking on the sidewalk, a sleek black SUV pulled up beside them. A tall man in a suit stepped out and nodded to Nathan. "Sorry to interrupt, sir. You have an emergency board call in 20. Evelyn froze at the word sir. It was a title that belonged to another world, not to the man who laughed at her jokes and read poetry with her. Nathan's posture stiffened for a second. He looked at Evelyn, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and apology. "I'll call you right after," he said. She nodded, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. As he slid into the car and the door closed, the glass tinted black, and she felt very far away from him. The man she knew was gone, replaced by the CEO, the billionaire. The car sped off, leaving her standing alone on the street, feeling small and insignificant. That night and the next day, the silence was deafening. No message, no call. By the third day, she had stopped checking her phone every 10 minutes. She told herself that this was why you don't fall for people like him. People who live in boardrooms and private jets and worlds where you don't belong. The little bubble they had built had burst. When her phone finally buzzed late on the third evening, her heart jumped. It was him. "I'm so sorry. I should have explained everything earlier. Can we talk?" Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, the doubts and fears swirling in her mind. She typed her response, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't know if I can do this, Nathan. I'm not like the women in your world." His reply came instantly. "That's exactly why I'm still here." His words hit her like a wave of truth. They were not a promise of an easy solution, but an acknowledgement of their unequal worlds. Still, something had shifted. That night, Evelyn opened her laptop and found the old folder with her unfinished book draft. She hadn't touched it in 4 years. She read the first line aloud to herself and didn't cry. For the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. Not because of him, but because of a quiet strength she was rediscovering within herself. The next morning, she sent him a voice message instead of a text. Her voice shook a little, but she spoke from the heart. "I'm not ready to fall," she said. "But I'm not ready to walk away either." His reply was a single text message that appeared moments later. "Then I'll wait on the edge with you." Evelyn and Nathan met at a hidden garden cafe on the edge of the city. His suggestion. It was a place of quiet stone paths and hanging ivy. Like a setting from a forgotten novel. The kind of place you couldn't find unless someone showed you. He was already seated when she arrived, wearing his usual calm white shirt with rolled sleeves. No jacket, no driver, just him. They talked like nothing had broken, but a small space had grown between their words. It wasn't mistrust, just fear. A quiet acknowledgement of the chasm between their worlds. Nathan reached across the table, his hand resting gently on hers. "There's a fundraiser next week. Art, wine, music. I want you there with me." Evelyn blinked. "What? Come with me," he repeated. She hesitated, her gaze falling to her hands. "Nathan, that's your world. I don't belong there." "No," he said gently. "It's the world I'm trying to leave behind, but I need to go, and I want you beside me." She looked down at her simple, worn dress. "I don't have anything to wear for art and wine kinds of places." He smiled. "Then we'll go get one." Later that afternoon, they walked into a boutique Evelyn had only ever seen from the outside. The clothes were breathtaking. She touched nothing, feeling as though everything belonged to someone else's life. But Nathan stood behind her, patient and quiet. She tried on 3 dresses. The fourth was simple deep green with soft fabric and long sleeves that made her feel held. When she stepped out, Nathan didn't say a word. He just looked at her like she was the art itself. "I don't belong in your world," she whispered. He stepped forward, his eyes steady on hers. "Then let's build a new one." The night of the event, Evelyn nearly backed out 3 times. Her heels felt too tall, her anxiety too loud. But when the elevator opened, Nathan was there. Not in a suit, just a dark shirt, an open collar, hands in his pockets. That same look in his eyes that said, "You don't have to pretend." At the event, people stared not with cruelty, but with curiosity. She didn't fit their mold, and he wasn't hiding her. A woman leaned in during a conversation, a polite smile on her face. "So how did you two meet?" Evelyn answered honestly. I panicked and hugged him at a wedding. There was a beat of silence. Then Nathan laughed. Best surprise of my life. The woman's smile tightened and she moved on. But later, as Evelyn stepped out onto a balcony for air, she didn't feel embarrassed. She felt seen. And then she overheard it. Two men near the edge of the terrace. Cute but temporary. These kinds of girls never last long. Nathan always goes back to his own kind. Her heart sank. Not because it was true, but because it could be. She left without a word. Nathan found her the next morning at the bookstore. She was sitting on the floor surrounded by poetry, her knees pulled to her chest. He sat down beside her. I heard what they said. She didn't look at him. Were they wrong? He was quiet for a moment. They were cruel, and they were wrong. You didn't defend me. I didn't want to make a scene and embarrass you, he said, his voice steady. I just knew that what I say isn't what changes things, it's what I do. Evelyn didn't answer. Nathan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded printout. It's a lease agreement. The space next to the bookstore. I bought it for you. Evelyn's eyes widened. No strings attached, no deals, just your space, your story. I want you to have something that's yours, even if I'm not part of it. Tears filled her eyes. This is too much. No, he said softly. You are, but she didn't take the key. Not yet, because love to her wasn't about being gifted things. It was about being trusted to choose. And she didn't know yet if she was ready. Evelyn didn't speak to Nathan for 2 weeks. It wasn't out of anger, but out of fear. Fear of what she was feeling. Fear of what it meant to love someone who came from another world. She was afraid that by accepting his gifts and his love, she would lose herself. The lease agreement for the storefront sat folded on her kitchen table, a constant reminder of the dream he had placed at her feet. She stared at it every morning, like it was a mirror reflecting a version of herself she wasn't sure she deserved. She had dreamed of a little bookshop cafe since she was 19, and now it was right there, offered with no expectations. So why couldn't she just say yes? Because she didn't want to feel like she owed her dreams to someone else's wallet. She wanted to know she had built it from her own breath, her own backbone. She wanted to be the architect of her own life, not just a recipient of someone else's generosity. Nathan didn't text or call after the first few days. He had promised not to chase her, to give her space, but part of him wondered if that space had become a permission to disappear. He stood in his office surrounded by people who spoke in profit, margins and press releases, and felt completely alone. He opened the bookstore app on his phone and searched for her favorite authors. It didn't make the silence hurt less, but it reminded him of who he missed. Then, one afternoon, Evelyn received a letter. It had no name, no return address. Just a single page inside with a single typed sentence. You were never small. You were simply holding yourself in so tightly, no one could see how big your heart was. She folded it carefully and put it in her notebook. She knew it was from him. He had once said the same thing, only out loud. That night her best friend Olivia came over with wine and no judgment. They sat on the floor barefoot, surrounded by takeout containers and the comfortable silence of their friendship. Do you love him? Olivia asked, her voice soft. Evelyn hesitated, picking at a loose thread in the carpet. I think I do. Then why are you scared? Because he saw all of me too quickly before I could filter anything, Evelyn admitted. He saw my panic, my messy life, my old dresses, and he still stayed. What if I let myself love him and I lose me? Olivia picked up her glass. What if you love him and find more of you than you ever thought possible? The question hung in the air like a profound truth. The next day, Evelyn stood outside the empty storefront next to the bookstore. She didn't have the key, but she pressed her palm against the glass and whispered, If this is meant to be mine, I'll come back for it. She didn't walk away because she didn't want it, but because she was finally learning how to choose when she was ready. She walked into her cafe and started working. That evening she sent Nathan a voice message, not a text. Her voice shook a little, but she spoke with a newfound conviction. "You scared me, Nathan, because I've never been loved without conditions. I don't want your money. I don't want a fairy tale. I want the man who held me like I was more than my panic. I want the man who reads poetry and remembers what I love. And if he's still out there, tell him I'm not running anymore." She pressed send, then cried and smiled all at once. The next morning, a knock came at her door. She opened it to find a small brown box. Inside was a tiny ceramic bookstore figurine, hand-painted. No note, no signature, just one detail. In the miniature shop's tiny window, there were 2 chairs, and on one chair sat a tiny folded napkin. A printed quote on it read, "Start the chapter." I'm already on the first page. The sun was just rising when Evelyn walked through the quiet city streets. In her tote bag was a new feeling, no longer fear but possibility. She stopped in front of the empty storefront, the one Nathan had offered, the one she had once felt too small to claim. This time she didn't just press her hand to the glass. She pulled out a key, not because she needed him to give it to her again, but because she had gone back to the landlord and signed the lease in her own name. She bought it from Nathan with every cent she had, her savings, gigs, and a small loan. It wasn't easy, but it was hers, and she wanted him to know that before anything else could begin, Nathan was sitting on the same rooftop where they had shared pastries and coffee, reading the novel Evelyn had once said saved her life. The wind gently tousled his hair, and his face was calm, a stark contrast to the boardroom chaos he had just left. He looked up when he heard her footsteps, and a deep sense of relief washed over him. It was as if he had been holding his breath for 2 weeks and could finally exhale. Evelyn walked over, a tote bag slung over her shoulder, and sat down beside him. She placed the small ceramic bookstore figurine between them. "I got your bookstore," she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet pride he had never heard before. He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "And I got your message." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just taking each other in. Then Evelyn reached into her tote bag and handed him the signed lease agreement. His brows raised in surprise as he looked at the document. "You bought it?" he asked. "I needed it to be mine," she said, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Before I could be yours." Nathan's throat tightened with emotion. He reached for her hand and intertwined their fingers. "So does this mean," he began, his voice a little husky. "It means," she said, a smile finally breaking through, "you don't have to save me. You never did." He nodded slowly, a profound understanding in his eyes. "I didn't want to save you. I just wanted to see you." Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes, but they were tears of happiness. "I've never felt more seen," she whispered. And then she leaned into him, not out of panic, not to hide from her past, but because she wanted to. It was a conscious choice, a deliberate act of love. He wrapped his arms around her, not to shield her, not to fix her, not to impress her, but just to hold her. The embrace was a silent promise of a future they would build together. Not a future he would provide for her. 6 months later, the bookshop cafe opened its doors. It was called The First Page. The interior was a reflection of Evelyn herself, warm, honest, and inviting. It was a place where people came not just for the books or the coffee, but for the feeling of community, a sense of belonging. The front was filled with meticulously curated books, and in the back Evelyn ran a small cafe serving homemade pastries and coffee. Nathan, a silent partner, helped with weekend readings, and occasionally Evelyn would find him in the front window shelving her favorite titles, always in twos. One for her and one for whoever needed a story. Their love never became a headline. It didn't need to. It was a private narrative, a quiet and gentle story written 1 page at a time. It was built on hugs that didn't need reasons and words that didn't have a price tag. It was a love that was hard-won and all the more beautiful for it. The final scene sees Evelyn and Nathan sitting on the floor of her bookshop after closing hours. The scent of old paper and fresh coffee fills the air. They are surrounded by books, their quiet laughter echoing in the peaceful space. The bookshop is a testament to their journey, a physical manifestation of their new world. Evelyn is working on her novel, finally writing her own story. Nathan is there beside her, his presence a steady anchor. She has found her voice, her purpose, and a love that celebrates both. They are no longer two people trying to escape their worlds, but two people creating a new one together.